Hey everybody, happy Thursday. Hope you're doing well. It is a beautiful day here in Wisconsin, and in this video I wanted to be talking about what I will be using for my weddings this coming summer. We are getting ready to go into our wedding season right now. May is kind of the kickoff. I've got 3 weddings coming up in May, so I'm really looking forward to that season. It's nice to have spring as well. But I also wanted to let you know that I'm doing things a little bit differently in terms of the kit from last year. It's not that the focal lengths have changed so much or everything has changed, but my camera bodies have changed, and they've changed quite significantly. There has been a lot of things that have happened since last summer, even since last fall, that I'm now bringing into my kit for this year. And it starts with the cameras. And the first is that one in the center. That is the A1, and that is the new flagship from Sony. It's 50 megapixels, which is a little high for my taste for weddings, but it has this incredibly fast processor that allows for incredibly fast readout so that you don't get a lot of rolling shutter effects. It also has an anti-flicker filter in silent shooting mode, which is really handy when you're trying to photograph in low light situations where there might be some bad lighting or some bad LEDs that need to be corrected. So that is a really helpful thing. It also has flash syncing with silent shutter. So that means you, with the right flash, the right shutter, you can go up to 30 frames a second. Not that you would necessarily need it, but if you have it, you might want it. I also do a lot of sports. I do video as well. So my second camera might surprise you in that it is this, an A7S III. And you might think, oh gosh, why would a wedding photographer want something that's only 12 megapixels and is primarily for video? And that's true. I mean, both of those points are correct. I mean, it is primarily a video-centric camera, but the stills are incredible too. And the fact that Adobe has announced a way to do some artificial intelligence algorithm or whatever to make a 12 megapixel file res up to 48 megapixels with incredible quality kind of negates some of the issues about 12 megapixels being not big enough. I've got a photo on the wall in the studio that's a 40 by 60, and it was made with an original 5D. So that was 12 megapixels, and that was a camera that came out in 2005. So we are talking about many years difference, better sensors, better technology, all of that stuff. 12 megapixels now is definitely not what 12 megapixels used to be. And when you couple that camera, that sensor, with the fast glass, like the new 35-1.4, the new 50-1.2, the 135-1.8, it gives you some incredible opportunities to shoot available light at receptions or even in very dark churches that you may not have had before. And so that's a very, very useful tool to me. Additionally, I do a lot of video, and so having an A7S III, which is video-centric, is great. And I say 2 cameras are the minimum. I always say think of 2s. 2 camera bodies. Ideally, it'd be nice if they were identical, but it doesn't have to be. 2 cameras, so for me, they're 2 full-frame cameras, and then have 2 lenses that kind of cover the same range or can overlap so that if one should go down, you'll be able to continue to make photos. And then have 2 flash units, because you can't go back and do a wedding. It's a one-off, and at least by intent, it's a one-off event. So we have to be ready for any situation, which is very similar to the background I had in newspapers, where you had to photograph something that was not repeatable. So you had to be able to deliver the goods no matter what. And so that's one of the things why I always think of kind of like a Noah's Ark strategy, 2x2, and have two bodies and 2 lenses and 2 flash units. Now, for me, the lenses that I use, it's kind of changed. I mean, there's some times in my career I was all primes. There was other times I was primarily zooms. And so that is You know, that's another debate. We can get into it some other time, but I've fallen in love with the 24 to 70 G Master because it's just so versatile and it's so sharp, and it's the best one that I've used to date. And will they ever update it and make it better? I suspect they might, but God knows when. I hope it's soon. But I love this lens, and I still continue to use it for portraits, and I use it for weddings, and I use it for, it's kind of like my go-to. But it is bigger, it's heavier, and it's pricier than its companion lens, which is the 24 to 105. And that's an f4 lens, and it's a G lens, so it's just a little bit of a step down technically from what a G Master is, price and performance, but it's no slouch. And it also has optical steady shot, which makes it really handy when you're hand holding it for video as well, and even for stills. So it's a lighter, less expensive, and still terrific option. And so there's the 24 to 70 2.8, and then let me see the other one. So that lens right there, so we've got the 24 to 70. The one that I'm touching right now is the 135 1.8. That lens has just totally changed things for me. I could probably do 95% of what I want to do with both of those two lenses. That's not to say those are the right lenses for everybody. They just tend to work for me in the way I see the world. I tend to see the world with a 35, 50, or 55 and 85 or 135 perspective. Sometimes a little wider, sometimes a little longer. It just kind of depends what it is. But that is my kind of wheelhouse, that 35, 55, 135 area. I live in that world no matter what, whether it's a inexpensive 35 or an expensive 35. It's how you frame the world, and really the lenses help definitely make it happen, but it's really about how you see and what you get used to in framing. So those two lenses provide the bulk of it. But if one should go down, it might be difficult to cover a wedding with only a 135. A 24 to 70 would be probably doable because it is, as my friend Joe Barnett calls it, the KTLA lens, the keep the lawyers away lens, because it's a lens that you really could use for the entire day. You don't need necessarily anything longer. You could if you're in an event where you're far away. But if you had to, if everything else failed and you just had a 24 to 70, you could really do a heck of a job. But I also wanted to bring in these two lenses right here. These are tiny little things. These are my two original Sony lenses, believe it or not. I bought them in 2014, and I actually bought them both used off of Craigslist. And I still have them, and I still love them, and I still will keep them. They do have sentimental value to me too, but they also have real practicality as well. For one, they're both super small, so I can throw them in my bag and they will take up no room. And they weigh virtually, relatively nothing, which is really super. But they also are very good performers, especially this lens, this 55 1.8. I would say that this would be a lens, or a 51.4, like the nifty 50, that you also add to those two other lenses, because if both of those lenses go down, and that is probably going to be a rarity, then you've got this 55 that you can count on, and maybe even a 35 that you could use for groups. Those four lenses could probably do the bulk of what you need and just give you that kind of peace of mind that you would want to have in terms of having enough backups. There are folks that go to weddings with like just a couple lenses, and that's fine. I mean, if they want to do that, that's great. I just feel really, really, I just feel really, I get kind of nightmares if I don't bring everything that I think I should bring. I probably bring a little bit too much, but I'd rather have too much than too little. And then over there, you'll see to the right are two flash units. Now, I recommend that you use TTL flash units, and these are Sony specific flash units, and they are made by Godox. The one on the far right is the V1, which is their more current version. It also has an LED light built in, which could be very helpful for either lighting or helping you focus in a really dark situation. And then the other one is a V860 version 2, and that's Sony specific, and that is your basic speed light. And I rarely use those. I pretty much just use one, the V1, and it works really well. It could be all you need. One light might be all you need, but again, I always encourage folks to have two because you do need a backup in case one takes a hit. I've had the foot break on the V1, and while they're easy to fix, you may not have the time at a wedding to fix it. So if you have to have a backup, you really need it right then and there. And so that's why I encourage folks to have the backups. Now there's the HVL F60RM, which is the Sony top of the line. And that's a very good strobe. And they also have a really strong foot on that flash. It's a metal foot. These feet on the flash, this Sony Godox flash, it's not strong at all. So you have to be very careful when you put this into your camera, and you really want to be extra careful if you're using it on it with an umbrella. And I'll talk a little bit about a way to mount these with umbrellas that I think is safe. And that Sony Flash is really nice. The only thing I don't particularly like about the Flash, I find it very solid, super great recycle, consistent exposures from frame to frame, but it does not use lithium-ion batteries. These Godox ones have a lithium battery that are really handy. Eventually I will go all to the V1s, but for the time being this will be my backup. It's really easy to carry extras. You don't have to worry about charging up 48 AA's before a wedding, which I used to do, things like that. So it makes the preparation before a wedding a lot easier by having lithium-ion batteries and then chargers that are running off of USB-C or USB micro drives or things like that. So very easy to keep a lot of batteries ready to go for a wedding. This is a stand adapter, and it works really well to mount a speed light into an umbrella or into a off-camera position. But I recommend that you use these little feet, these little feet that come with your flash. Keep that with your flash, and then you can screw the 1/4-20 into the bottom of it, because this is a plastic foot, or a plastic foot that works well with the plastic foot that's with the Godox strobe. It's not ideal. I mean, you wouldn't want to shake this around. If it's going to fall, it's going to take a hit. But it's, I think, a better way to mount a flash speed light into a umbrella using this, rather than using a metal cold shoe, which would be fine with that Sony HVL F60R or any other strobe. You know, all the other brands seem to have really strong ones. Hopefully Godox will update the foot on these strobes. They really need them, and I hope that they do that sooner rather than later. I think I talked about the A7S III, and you might ask yourself, well, is 2 cameras enough at a wedding? And excuse me just a second, I got something stuck in my throat. Sorry about that. Thanks for the break. I really prefer to carry 3 bodies. And it's not that I like to work with them necessarily. There was a time when I used to. But now I really want to have a third for a backup. And this year I'm adding an FX3, which is more of a video-centric camera. And it's probably not the camera for everybody to add as a third body. But for me, doing a lot more video in wedding and other kind of work, I wanted to have a video-centric camera that I think is really, really wonderful. It has all of the essence of an A7S III, but in the form factor of a video camera. And it's something that I'm really excited about incorporating. Now I can still shoot stills with it. I get 12 megapixel stills. I just don't have an EVF like I do with the A7S III, but I have a swing out screen just like the A7S III, and it's a great camera. It may not be for everybody though, and I understand that. So maybe you would get maybe you have an A7 III or maybe an A7C. That would be another good body to have as either a second or a third body. And The cameras that I'm showing here are obviously premium brands. There are the premium models. They're very expensive. I mean, the A1 is quite pricey at $6,500, but it is an incredible value, I think, when you consider what it can do in terms of mechanical speed with flash up to 1/400th of a second, but also 30 frames a second electronic and without any kind of rolling shutter issues. It's an amazing camera. And it's, to me, it's truly a pro. It has the pro designation. And the A7S III is about $3,500, and it's really geared towards more video-centric creators. But it's also a great stills camera, and it still has all the form factor things that we're used to, EVFs, and an incredible EVF at that, too, with a 9 million pixel viewer. So it's really quite nice to look through it. But there's other cameras, too, like the A7C is an incredible value at $1,800, and it could be a first or second camera for people coming into the business. It could also be a great second if you have an A7S2 or an A7S III, and you want to get a small body like the A7C for travel and things like that. So it is a full frame body that looks like the APS-C cameras like the A6600. So it's really, really great in that regard. It's a superb little camera, and it surprised me at how much I liked it. I still prefer these cameras over that, but all things being equal, if I were starting out and I needed a second body and I wanted full frame, that would be the one I would add to it. It makes a really good second body. So those are the flash, the lenses, and then there's other things that I would bring with me, but I might not necessarily use too much, and I just wanted to bring those by and show them to you as well. One of them is the 70-200 2.8, which is kind of a standard issue for most of the wedding photographers. There's that 12 to 20, I'm sorry, that is the 24 to 105 G. So this is a smaller version of this. You can see them, a little side-by-side action right there. This is great for video especially. So there's that 70-200. Now, I must admit though that since I've gotten the 135, I don't use this lens nearly as much. It's a bit older in design. It came out in 2016, and it is still a superb lens, though in terms of autofocus speed and performance, the 135 G Master has linear motors, so therefore it's even better, faster, more precise, and quieter, which makes it my go-to now. It's simply an amazing lens. I love it, and it means that I don't use this as much, although I would still bring it to a wedding because there's times when you need it, and it is a good backup. This is a 16-35 2.8, and I'm not much of a wide-angle, really wide shooter, unless I'm doing something like interiors or something like a big church that has a basilica that I want to include. A 16-35 would be something that I would use in that situation, but I would rarely use it for the day-to-day wedding coverage. Now, I know other photographers, they love this lens for weddings, and that's totally cool. That's great. Everybody's going to kind of find their little niche lenses that work really well. There are maybe 3, 4, 5 lenses that they are their go-to. In fact, I have a friend who, she shoots weddings with these two lenses, a fast 50 millimeter and a macro lens. So these are her go-tos for her, and it all works, and it doesn't matter, you know, what I use or what other people use. It's what you find works best for you. But I'm just sharing this as a way to kind of maybe give you some ideas about how you might want to utilize it, and then thinking about things for backup. This is a 90 macro, and it's a great lens, but it doesn't get a lot of use for me even in the wedding day. Pretty much the only time I use this is when I'm doing details. Cake, rings, invitations, things like that. This macro comes in really handy, and it is the main reason I got it. Now, could you go to a wedding without a macro lens? I think you could. You might want to get something like a close focus or an extension ring. It doesn't allow you that level of precision. You just have to move your body to focus rather than being able to focus where you are. Or you could use an older lens, like an old manual mount lens, like an old Canon FD or a Nikon, old Nikkor 55 micro Nikkor. Something like that with an adapter for Sony could work really well. it would give you more of a vintage feel, I think, because of the way that those lenses were coated back then. And if you don't use it a lot, it might be all you need, and it would be a way to have a macro lens without really going into a bigger investment. This is a lens that I'm glad I have it, but it's not a lens that I use a lot. I tend to use the 135 a lot more, especially even for portraits, although you could use this for portraits in a pinch. So that's the 90. This is an 85-1.8. Very small, very inexpensive. In fact, if you were to create a budget kit with, say, two A7Cs, you could use an 85, that 55-1.8, and a 35-1.8, and you would have a great little prime run and gun in a very small package. This is a relatively inexpensive lens at right around $600, and it's a great performer optically. And though it's not a G or a G Master lens, it has a focus hold button on the side, which the 35-1.8 does too, which is really, really handy, especially if you use it for video and you use that for focus hold as is the default on the camera. And then finally, for lenses, this is my last of the lenses that are in the backup kit, and that's the 24-1.4. This is a great lens. I use it a lot for gimbal work, but I also like it in, say, you're at a reception and it's been a long day, you've been carrying the 24-70, your shoulders are a little tired after 8 hours, you might break out this lens or the 35-1.8 or the 35-1.4 and just work with one camera, one lens, and maybe one flash, or not. And that way you can kind of save your back a little bit. So those are the lenses that I typically bring to the wedding, and how I bring them to the wedding is something that's a very personal decision. A lot of people like rollers. A lot of people like rollers, some people like backpacks. I find rollers are great for travel. They become a little bit of a kind of a burden if you're in an urban environment and you got to pick them up, take them upstairs and things like that. Backpacks I find are really great on like destination weddings or beach weddings or something where you want to keep things off the sand and keep things off the back, although I find them very difficult to work out of. They always have to go down. So sometimes you may have to throw a towel in your bag just to have it if you need to spread out to put the backpack down. So that's one of those kind of things that, you know, it's a very personal decision. So both of those to me are more built for transport, whether it's going through the airport or working at the hotel, but they're not really for me very fast in terms of like the day-to-day changing of lenses right in the midst of a wedding day. And so I want to show you what I'm using for my main side little go-to bag, run bag. This is the Everyday Sling. It's by Peak Design, and it's a 10-liter size. And it's very, very solid, really easy to organize, and it protects the lenses in there. It's got a nice padding, but it's not too much. I wish it was just a tiny bit bigger in the pockets. Excuse me, but I'll take that because it's got a real nice quick handle for carry. But I like the strap in that it's padded, but it's not too big, too bulky. And I can use it kind of bandolero style so that I could put 2 extra lenses in there and a flash and then my batteries and extra cards. And this way they stay right with me all the time. So the cameras would be out, and then the bag would be my go-to to do my changes and things like that. I've tried a lot of different bags, and they all have their pluses and their minuses, and this is the closest thing that I found to the perfect bag. Of course, you know, photographers are always on that quest for the perfect bag. It's like the holy grail for us in some ways. It's the unicorn, is finding the perfect bag to work out of. I don't like to put them on one side. I like to now use them kind of bandolero style, because when you've carried a bag for as many years as I've carried a bag, your back is going to feel it. And ideally, I'd love to be able to do nothing but work out of a shoulder bag. But I find that I want to keep my body in better shape as I get older, and I'm in it for the long haul. And so therefore I find this makes it a little bit easier for carry. And it also kind of leads me to the thought about straps. And speaking of Peak Design, I'm using a Peak Design system for straps. I don't have them here because they're a little bit, they take up a little space and I don't want them to knock over anything. But the thing I love about the Peak Designs is they're easily adjustable, and I can use them to steady myself quickly with video, handheld, but they're also easy to pop on and off, whether it's putting the camera on a tripod or a gimbal. But I also can use them and kind of expand the length of them very quickly because they have a seatbelt kind of material that's got a nice little grip on it and a really cool buckle that's super fast to change. It's the best one that I found, and I use the slide light with these cameras. There's bigger ones and there's slightly smaller ones, but I find that the slide light is the perfect size for what I'm doing. And that brings me to those backpacks. I'm going to go back to the backpacks a little bit. I've been using the Think Tank products since they started, and they're superb. Their airport security is their biggest roller, and one of the things that makes that roller particularly good is the fact that it can take a 70 to 200 and you can store it vertically. So that means it doesn't have to be stored from the side, which takes up a lot of room. But it does come at a price. It's heavier. It sometimes gets looks from gate agents at airplanes, and it can be heavy if you load it up. So that's something to consider. It's very well protected though, and it's a bag that I will bring to travel sometimes because I need to bring more stuff like some lighting gear and things like that. But ideally, local weddings, if I don't have to carry that, I'd like not to, just because it is bigger. And again, it's that whole dilemma with the rolling bag. So for rolling bags that I'm really high on right now, this is the one. It's again a Think Tank bag. It's called the Airport Advantage. And one of the things that I like about it is they've created they're using materials that make the frame very light while still giving it protection. I'm not sure how they're doing that. And it makes it easy to carry a nice amount of gear. Like if I've got 2 cameras and then the lenses with that Peak Design bag, then the extra stuff can go in this, and I might be able to keep a light stand and an umbrella to do any kind of lighting that I might need for formals or details or something like that. Or if you want to put a tripod in there, there's ways to attach it. I just think that it's a really nice compromise in terms of size and weight and still storage capabilities. So it's a really great bag. It's called the Airport Advantage. I do like my backpacks, and the thing is I don't want a big backpack because then they become bulky and hard to maneuver, but I like this small one. And the one that I've really used quite a bit is the Think Tank Airport Essentials. It's virtually the size of the Airport Advantage. They're almost identical in terms of what they can store. And again, it's that situation, if I'm traveling, I'll typically use that and maybe the Airport Advantage to carry an extra light because I can take them both on. And they've been working really well for me. They've become kind of my go-tos, and if I really need more room, then I bring the Airport Security. I also have the Airport International, which is the middle one, and I don't use that as much. I mostly use that as kind of a storage roller. It's not my day-to-day kind of roller. These two that I'm showing here today, the Airport Advantage and the Airport Essentials backpack, have become my main go-tos. And one other thing that I want to talk about is the light stands, because there's a lot of thought about that I think you need to consider, be concerned about when it comes to lighting. Just one sec. So in the back there, you see oops. This is the 8200, the Godox 8200. So it's a little bit more than almost twice as, gives you an extra stop of power compared to your speed lights. Those are about 70 watt seconds. This is 200. And I find that this is a really good size for doing nice portraits. And because high ISOs are less of a problem with these Sonys, It's not like the old days where you had to shoot 100 to get good quality. Now you can shoot 4, 8, 1600 and it looks great. So power is not necessarily as big of an issue. And also the A1, which has a sync speed of 1/400th of a second outside, gives me an extra stop. So if I'm outside trying to overpower the ambient or at least balance it, I'm already a stop ahead of what most other cameras sync at. So that's a real handy feature of that A1. So this is the Manfrotto Nanostand, which has become very popular for weddings and photographers who travel because it's super small, super light. But I almost think it's too small and too lightweight. Every time I bring this at an event, I always kick myself because I'm always worried that it's going to tip over. So this is the one that is kind of my go-to. It's an 8-foot stand made by Manfrotto, and I've had this for a long time. You can tell it's old because it's also branded Bogan. And Bogan was the importer for Manfrotto before they became Manfrotto USA or whatever they are now. But this is an old stand. They don't make it anymore, but they do make one that's 7.7 feet, and it's one of those locking stands. It's an aluminum stand, and it can go in the side of your rolling bag. And this is the one that I recommend because it's got a lot more stability than that Nano stand, which is super great for portability. But again, it's one of those situations when you go to a wedding, there's other people and a lot of other variables. Oftentimes there's kids running around, and I just don't want to have a light tip over if at all possible. If I can get away with not lighting at a wedding, I will. I just have to have these just in case. This can do a lot of great things. And with this little round head and adapter, it gives you a lot of concentrated power in a very small and inexpensive package. They've kind of taken over, in a lot of ways, a big part of the industry because they're such a great price per value, and they're also a really strong flash ecosystem. There's only a couple of companies that really have a strong speedlight to studio strobe ecosystem. One is Profoto, and those are incredibly great, but they're also very, very expensive. And then Godox is right there in that kind of that inexpensive but still very good. Now I know the purists will say it's not anywhere near as good as Profoto, and that may very well be true. But I know that this is a kind of flash that it's not going to cost me $1,200. It's going to cost me $300. So it's the kind of thing that has a lot of utility and a great value, and that's what I'm looking for. So that's about it. I hope that you found this video or this live stream helpful. If you have any questions, I ask you to leave them in the comments below. I will put together a list of these lenses and these basic kits in the comments so that you can go find them and check on them. They are not affiliate links, but I mean, if you have a local dealer, I encourage you to use your local dealer and support them, because in these COVID times, it really comes in handy to have that kind of support from a local buyer. And I look forward to seeing you. I plan on being here next Thursday at noon Central Standard Time. So I hope you have a great week. I hope you have a great weekend. If you're shooting a wedding, knock it out of the park, and I will talk to you soon. So thanks so much for watching. We'll talk to you later.